going to be to the personal, the realities of basic income. And on our panel, I'm pleased to introduce Toby Lloyd from UBI Arts Lab, this way, Beck from Salford University, Councillor Helen from Liverpool City Council, and Phelps, freelance musician you heard from earlier. So I would like to invite you to take a couple of minutes to just introduce yourself and the perspective, your starting point on the US basic income, where you're at the moment. So I will hand over, if it's okay, first to Toby Lloyd. And can I ask you to speak into the microphone just so that the sound reaches all the way to the back of the room? You might have to hold it.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Is that okay?
Can you hear right back there?
So, excuse me. So I haven't really prepared anything for an introduction, more for a conversation. But so I'm an artist. I had an experience which was, I feel like very much like having a basic income, and then because of that, I got more interested in basic income. Feeling that, yeah, enable people to sort of explore their creativity for one, but also a lot of people, just explore their creativity others. So I think a lot of people are able to do that, and it also enabled me to do lots of volunteering, meet people who I wouldn't normally meet in my normal social circles, especially being a middle-class white person. It was really good to do that, and I consider that kind of a consciousness-raising experience. After that experience, I applied to do a PhD. So again, this is relevant in terms of academia, how the limits of academia and moving outside of that. I don't consider myself an academic necessarily, but doing a PhD, which was funded, was like having a basic income again. I was funded 3 years by the university, which meant that I was financially secure, which was fantastic, and it meant that I could be volunteering, other things outside of that. Starting UBI labs for one thing, but the other thing is it was also the university investing in me. What I was doing was valuable. It wasn't just making art, it wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was actually research, which people cared about, but also having all the access to the resources and all that kind of stuff, which being an academic PhD student meant. So I guess I feel like basic income would be a way of investing in society. It would be us sort of investing in society and enabling people to do lots of things which currently are undervalued because they're not financially rewarding. So my PhD was looking at how can you use participatory art projects to communicate ideas like basic income. One of the problems which we face with basic income, I think, lots of sort of things is that it is white being blokes and glasses talking about it, for one. But also, yeah, it kind of has this academic kind of thing. Often, when people sort of cite reports or trials, it's sort of statistics and figures and graphs and all this kind of stuff, which doesn't really mean very much to normal people. You can sort of talk about all those people over there, but actually, it's the personal experiences of people taking part in basic income trials, and I consider my PhD, a funded one, being a basic income experiment. I use that, my experience of doing that, as an example of what I was able to achieve, especially being incredibly dyslexic, even just actually writing it was an achievement. So the projects which I was doing sort of ask people open questions which enable sort of the conversation to start. I realized very quickly that if you went up to someone and started asking, have you heard about basic income? It would very, very quickly turn into a kind of a debate style conversation, then either agreeing or disagreeing with you, and then you're trying to win the other person over, which I find people are much better at believing in something if they actually come to that conclusion themselves. So me trying to tell someone basically this is a brilliant idea, it didn't agree with me. Your stuff, you're on hiding to nothing really. So I'll just wrap up with this last bit. So yeah, I made all these different projects. I've got examples of one which I can give. I've got a few of them to give to people, but yeah, like one of the other projects I did asked people 3 questions, which were: what did you want to be when you were growing up? What gets you out of bed in the morning? And what would you do if you had your year off? And I found that people's justifications for their answers were far more revealing than the actual answers themselves. And wanted a conversation with them about their answers, then I was able to introduce the idea of, oh, have you heard about this thing for fixed income? It might enable you to do some of the things that you would like to apply. I'll leave it at that and thinking about, see what I
Super, thank you. And Dave, would you like to just briefly introduce yourself and your starting point on investigating?
So, my name's Beck, and I'm a lecturer in social policy at the University of Salford. Something that Toby didn't mention, he's just passed his PhD by himself, which is it's a massive achievement. I came at UBI very late. What I found is that I've become a very vocal supporter of UBI. If you do follow me on Twitter, it's usually by now. So I started my academic life really very late. Didn't go to university until I was 25. Left school with my GCSEs. I was talking to a friend of mine, Beth, the other day on Twitter about being thrown out of school for a couple of weeks for having a stupid haircut. So my academic life has been really, really difficult. Didn't get along in school, don't really like the education system still. And then I found myself really, really interested in food. And that was when my son's here. We moved to Wales for me to go to university at 25. And I didn't know what I was interested in. I was interested in something to do with geography. And then food banks hit on the social policy landscape. And that's quite interesting. What the hell is a food bank? So I went down to my local food bank in Bangor in North Wales. And I started volunteering there. And that's where I developed the idea for my PhD research, was to look at the growth of the emergency food bank landscape and the social policy decisions that have tipped people into using food banks. I got really, really interested in the idea of welfare and welfare reform. For me, it was welfare reform at 2012, following the introduction by the coalition movement that really, really tipped people into poverty. So it was interesting to hear Anna talk about welfare that's happened and welfare that's not happening. It allowed me to think about my own UBI journey. So I finally left precarious work about 2 years ago when I got a job at Salford University. And to be honest, I still live quite precariously. I think I've got about £4 left in the bank this morning. And I'm on a pretty good salary, as a grade 8 lecturer at the university, for those of you who know what that translates to. But I've got about £4 left in my bank, and I don't get paid tomorrow. And it's usually like that every month. You go home and you open the cupboards and you think, shit, pasta again. Pasta and cheese tonight, pasta and peas yesterday. It still happens, and I'm quite annoyed that it still happens to me. But, anyway, so my research is on food poverty, and as somebody who's lived in food poverty, I'm not coming out my research and my talking, my lecture on it from an academic background. I'm coming at it from a lived experience background. That's what I'm really interested in. So I found myself talking to people in food banks, asking them why they're in this situation. And it is the welfare system we've got. It's not a social security system, it's a social insecurity system. It's been politically designed over the last 10 years to be more conditional and to trip people up and to place them in poverty. And that's the idea of neoliberalism. And for me, the universal basic income seems to be the answer. I was stopping and looking at people at the bottom and questioning, why they're there. We know what the answer is, and it's the answer that's happening up there. So this is why my research started to move more upstream, to look at the reasons why people are falling in the stream and to challenge this social security system. And I remember when COVID hit and we're all in lockdown, and I'm sat outside in my backyard with a laptop, still working. And I'm thinking, well, it's all right for me. I can still sit here and I can still work, I'm still getting paid, I can still do exactly the same job. I just teach online. And I thought, well, it's all right for me saying that, but you can't stack shelves from home. There must be something that needs to change in our social security system, because we keep coming up against these crises, and this crisis is hitting again and again and again. COVID's the most recent crisis. I think Brexit is going to be a massive crisis, so it's going to change the way we work. We need to change the social policy landscape. So I was quite happy to hear Andy Burnham mention that. So hopefully we've all come away from here with I'm guessing most of us are here are UBI supporters or got interested. But hopefully were able to leave here and spread more of a deeper message about UBI, about the challenge, the challenge that it can bring to the social policy landscape.
Thank you very much. Helen.
Hiya, can everyone hear me?
Might need to hold it closer to your mouth. It's a bit weird, isn't it? I feel like I've got my hairbrush and I'm in my bathroom.
Makes me feel like I'm doing karaoke.
I know.
Hiya, I'm Helen Stevens. I'm a Liverpool City Councillor and very recently elected, so very new to it. And I'm also the chair of the self-employed section of Community Trade Union. And so I want to talk a little bit about self-employment. So there's the self-employed sector makes up, I think it's about 15% of the workforce. It's actually more than the public sector now. And there's a misconception that people are forced into it, either through bogus self-employment or because they're unemployable. And there's an ignorance among sort of policymakers and politicians that the way to sort of fix the problems that are facing the self-employed is with employment. And actually, 91% of people who are self-employed have chosen to be self-employed. So being self-employed can be inconsistent. I've been self-employed for 12 years now, and it's been very up and down during that period. We don't always have regular pay. We don't have a guarantee of customers or clients. We have to deal with things like late invoice payments, clients wanting to dictate to us how much we charge for our services, and we lose more of our income to national insurance than employees do. But we don't get any of the statutory support like sick pay. So obviously not working means not earning. And financial stress has a huge impact on mental health and our well-being. But on the flip side, being self-employed can be very flexible, gives us the flexibility and a lot of job satisfaction, which, personally speaking, is essential for my mental health and my well-being. I've found over the years that the work that has given me the most satisfaction is actually the work that doesn't really pay anything, doesn't generate an income. For me, that's community support and writing. For others, it might be art or music or drama, craft, things like that. So for me, UBI would give everyone a chance to generate an income doing what they want to do, what they love, with a safety net that it's okay to try and fail and to keep on trying. It'll allow self-employed workers to take breaks, to get sick and take the time off to recover, and to survive both physically and mentally when they're chasing those late payments.
Super, thank you. And if you could, I know we heard from you a little earlier, but just give us a reminder.
Thanks again for having me. So I'm Molly Phelps. I am a freelance musician, artist, and facilitator. I resonate a lot with what's been said already. And I was asked maybe a month or two ago to be on this panel, maybe a month ago. And because I have a precarious income, and I didn't really think about it, and I was like, oh yes, I do, definitely fall into that category. And I've never really even considered universal basic income until I was asked, because, it seemed like a faraway concept that someone was going to give me money just so I could be healthier and do my work better and just be myself. So that was quite interesting. It's been fascinating today. I'll finish really quickly with just saying what that some of the work, because Kate and I from Bright Sound were quickly talking about where does music and creativity sit in this. And it's fascinating that all the people I get to work with, even being able to give them their space for their own voice. It's not me at all, I'm the facilitator. It's space for them to create. And even if they grow up and they don't work in music, I think that ability to be able to understand that they have self-worth, they have a place, and that their voice is really important. And I think universal basic income would just reinforce that, to make that a reality, rather than having to go into something that doesn't interest them and ultimately they won't stay engaged with because it doesn't serve all their skills and how important they could be as a member of society.
Super, thank you. Let's go straight. I've got some questions, but let's go straight to your questions and then we'll make it up. Who has anyone got a burning question? You can do something that hasn't spoken before first. Can I invite you to ask your question, please? Yeah, Helen.
Hi, I'm John. I've got a question about rules. So I wonder why you don't talk about a maximum income ceiling and from a policy perspective, what do you think would be most genuinely transformative? Universal basic income or the modification of the housing market?
So, would anybody like to speak on that? Sorry, because it's such a fantastic question, isn't it? This panel is here to speak about the sort of personal implications of a universal basic income for themselves and the people that they work with, connect with, a sort of grassroots. So it may be that I could make a note of that, and if it's all right, I would like to postpone asking it until our next speaker, and then I may ask it on your behalf. Is that okay? Super. Does anybody else like to ask a question? Would you like to microphone?
My name is Owen Beck. I'm just asking how hard was it to get into university and do university with disability? Because I have dyslexia, dyspraxia, and nerve tremors. So I just want to see how hard it was. So I want to be an astronomer at Manchester University. I just want to see how hard it was for you.
Thanks very much for the question. So, are you okay to speak on this? Yeah? Who would like to speak it? You can tell them later.
So, I mean, for me, it was like just support from my family and things like that. But I mean, so I can only talk from personal experience. But going to school and I had support at school, and I went to university, and then I think apparently there was support available for me, but I, being dyslexic, didn't like filling in forms and was shy, so I didn't look for the help, so I didn't get it. I was pretty useless at my undergraduate, and then luckily became a teacher by accident and did that for a few years.
Because at school I get a laptop due to my nerve tremors. My handwriting's terrible. So I get a laptop to do typing for work. And there is a place at my school called the Hub where there's TAs to help me if I'm stressed or need support in class. So, for example, in science and history, I have a TA that goes into it and she'll write my book, everything I'm writing on my computer, and my work in my book for me. Just so if I need to find something easier for later, that I can just find my book and find what she's doing.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic. So I mean, just get the support you can do, and also just believe in yourself. Like it's just follow your dream. It doesn't have to happen straight away. Like I went back to university for masters, like when I was in university, and that I really enjoyed that. And that but I didn't enjoy earlier stuff. So if you enjoy it, then you're in the right direction.
Perfect. Just follow your dream, connect with people that can give you support. You can do it. Next questions? I'm going to go to you, if that's okay.
Hi, yeah, especially the able experience. I'm interested what your views are. I can see how UBI will affect access to it in terms of people not actually before. But I wonder what you have views on how UBI will affect the food system and what will be disrupted. See what I mean? In terms of how food is distributed.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I'm also co-chair of the UBI Lab Food Network. So, and in that, we do look at when the UBI has been potentially disruptive to the entire food system, top to bottom, beyond the farm gate, beyond people's plates, even to its eventual disposal. For me, I do think the UBI is a complete disruptor to the food system. Speaking to a farming friend of mine from North Wales, Gareth Wyn Jones, he does like the idea of UBI. He wasn't sold on it, completely until I explained to him that it would help people, for example, to be able to use farmers markets more often. It would be able to bring a more localized approach to people's purchasing habits of food. In terms of the wider geographical implications or the impacts of it, it would support farmers in lower income countries. Eventually, if the UBI becomes a global policy, there's massive support all along the system. My main focus really is on food bank users, and I can talk quite lengthy about that. Give people stability. My view is that a UBI will close food banks overnight. Maybe not overnight, maybe by the end of the week. But I think if we did, have a universal-based income, there would be no need for a food bank at all, because simply people would have money to be able to buy and choose their own food, which is really quite important when I think about food banks. I'm still in a precarious position. My mum volunteers at a local food co-op in West Alton. I use the food co-op in West Alton. Like I said before, I'm on a professional salary, but things are still difficult. I've got 4 kids, 4 teenagers, and he eats the most. But I've got 4 teenagers who are just like bins. They just shovel everything in. So we've had to resort to using a food co-op. £10 a week, and I get 20, 30 pounds of food. But it's fantastic. It would end that system. And I feel as a food poverty academic, it's quite difficult for me to say to people that I've used a food bank before. I still use a food co-op now. It's very, very difficult, especially when I talk professionally about them. But that's the situation we're in, and I have to accept it. So I think having a UBI, it will revolutionise the way that we understand and think about food. I think it will turn things on its head. I think it really is revolutionary. I think that didn't answer your question.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for Can
I ask Holly about the creative process itself? So not just having the time to do anything, but the time to create. Because one of the things about the book on scarcity that I'm sure it's people here about is about it narrowing the bandwidth. You're just very focused on this and you've got to go. What does it do to allow your bandwidth to widen and then you create it?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose it, time is obviously so precious to us all, and especially in the current day and age where everyone wants to pay for your time. I find that when I create, I have to now carve out time to do that. So whereas before I would be able to have an idea and then it naturally be able to have the time to do it. Now I have to actually go, I'm going to say no to this, 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 and this, so that I can allow a day or two. And one of the things that comes up a lot with some of my friends that do similar work to me is who are musicians, as well as freelancers, is this idea that you say yes and prioritize everyone else's work and not your own. And I think, as we all know, when you're happier in your head, you're able to do things better. You don't have a cloud come over you and you're thinking about something completely different when you're trying to do a task, maybe at work or maybe feeding your family or whatever it is. You're half there. So I suppose what it allows, or what I think this is the question, and correct me if I've not quite hit it, but to be able to have that space to create is fundamental for the quality of the creation, but also for the quality of your day-to-day, your hours, and ultimately your life. So it would be huge in terms of being able to prioritize that as something that's really important. And I think when I started trying to do everything, and as some of you may have heard, it didn't go very well for me, I gave away part of that, but then I realised I can't not do this. I'm also dyslexic, and I was going to chat to you afterwards. I had some advice that I'd just like to share with you as well. But I realised I have to create to feel happy and to be able to be my best self. So it's fundamental to me. It's not a choice. So I have to carve out that time, because otherwise I can feel my mental health really decline. Thank you.
Can I just follow? I'd say, yeah, I completely agree. Time is the most important thing, but also removing financial incentive as well. If you're making something that because you're going to earn money from it. I mean, sometimes that works, you know, deadlines are useful and things like that, but when everything is centered around money, you know, that limits the creativity, and I think, you know, it might sound contradictory to say, oh, give everyone money and then they don't have to do, you know, that makes it better, but that whole thing of like, if someone wants to learn an instrument or do something, like the first question is, oh, you're going to sell that, how are you going to make money out of that? It's just like, well, can't I just do it because it makes me happy, because it makes everything, you know, yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'll get all around.
Yeah, take that.
I just had a question in relation to the employment aspect, so self-employment aspect of sickness and national insurance. And I was wondering whether we know that UBI would cover all of that. But in the meantime, do you think that there's something within the system itself that needs to kind of recognise that self-employment is a form of work that should be treated in the same way as other forms of work? And I was wondering what your coping strategies are currently in order to be able to take leave, but also what happens when you're sick. Is there any kind of mechanism that you're able to kind of support yourself currently, or is it, I don't know.
So the union that I'm involved with, I'm never interested in a union because I'm self-employed, and for me unions are all about workers, but actually I work really hard and I generate income and I earn revenue, you know, I'm a worker. But there wasn't really any union around that represented self-employed people, or if they did, it didn't really do anything for them. And when I came across the community, they'd have a campaign around trying to encourage self-employed workers to take out their pensions and sort of think about their pension schemes and stuff. And I thought, well, it's something at least. And then during the pandemic, I reached out to them and said, look, we need to do something for self-employed people, because, you know, how do I get involved with the union? I'm not in a unionised workplace, there's no way for me to meet anyone else, what do we do? And so we formed a committee about 2 years ago, it was just at the start of the pandemic, and it's now become a formal part of the union. The main thing that we're looking at the moment is pushing for the sick pay for all, because from my perspective, it's a statutory thing, you know, and we all work, so we should all be entitled to it. We're all paying tax and national insurance. We should all be getting that support when we're sick. And I think the pandemic showed that there is a capability of doing that. So there must be a way of being able to extend that to self-employed workers, you know, in the same way that they managed it with the self-employed income support scheme. So that's kind of the big thing that we're looking at the moment. We're just sort of in the process of putting our policies together and looking at what our priorities are. But yeah, I would recommend sort of looking at community union and seeing, you know, what they're sort of keeping an eye on what they're doing. For me, when I'm sick, I'm just sick. I usually just have a backlog of work and then just try and fit it in. I'm lucky that I've got a couple of retainers, so I get paid that money every month, regardless of when I do the actual work. And then the sort of freelance commissions and stuff, I'm just very honest with people if I'm sick and I have to increase the deadline or anything like that. But yeah, I've had sort of 12 years of stressing about it, and there's been some months where I've been able to pay the rent and, you know, have my food in the fridge and stuff like that, and it's a massive concern. And I find when I'm worried about something, that's all I think about. So then I can see work piling up. I'm not doing the work, and if I'm not doing the work, I'm not getting paid, and then I'm getting more worried about it and stuff. So, certainly since the pandemic, I've kind of got in a much better routine, and I've got better things in place. But I think having the support of the union as well, and the fact that the union has sort of recognised that there is a big self-employed workforce that does need some support and recognition.
Have you heard of in Montreal there was a UBI project that happened for artists during COVID, in which they were able to get university dates in for all artists? So like that might be worth having a look at as well. That's something you can learn from.
One interesting thing that's come up for me was recently, so I had COVID just, I think the last 5, so I'll just keep reading it. So I had COVID just for the last 5 days that you were able to access that COVID support. And it was really lucky, because if I'd had it a week later, then I'd have to have cancelled a week full of work and got no compensation for it. And at the moment, that's still such a scenario for me. So in my contracts, if I have COVID, I can't go to work. So obviously, and I'd rather not go to work, obviously, with COVID. But then I don't get paid for that. So it's quite an interesting kind of gap that definitely is really present in my future, which I probably will get COVID again at some point, and just hope maybe that week I'm doing more work from home than delivery or gigs. We'll see.
Can I ask a follow-on from that question about freelance life and universal basic income? How do you think, in particular, universal basic income might benefit women? So thinking about freelance, you mentioned about freelance life having flexibility, that's what Bennett said at the beginning, it's a feminist issue. My question is, how do you think that universal basic income and gender go together?
It can be a difficult question, because one of the things with self-employed is obviously it's, a lot of mums, and, sort of new mums sort of wanting to spend more time with the children in the early years, quite often look at self-employment, which again also then sort of from the outside gets a little bit of a negative kind of lump in it, like it's a little bit kind of, gets a little bit patronising and not taken very seriously, which is really frustrating because they're working hard and they're doing whatever it is that they're doing, they're doing amazing things. And it's kind of almost disregarded, like it's not as important. Well, obviously any kind of self-employment, I think, is going to benefit from UBI because it is precarious at times, and whether it's self-employment in terms of creative, like the arts performance, whether it's a freelance, whether it's web design, accountancy, whatever it is that you're doing, there's always going to be times when your income levels change, and obviously that happens a lot. So from a maternity perspective, I think from parents, I'm really struggling with it. But I think for mums, for new mums, particularly if they're looking at going self-employed, it's obviously helpful because it's quite a scary thing. I think if you've been on maternity leave, like my niece is on maternity leave at the moment, she's just like, just can't afford it. It's like, oh, I'm so scared. And she started looking at, do I want to go back to work? Do I want to go self-employed? And obviously there's a lot of things to take into consideration then as well, like childcare and all that sort of stuff. So I think having that safety net of a basic amount of money coming in that will cover those sort of immediate costs will definitely bring people, because they have got those considerations. They've got so many other costs to think about, not just themselves. And so I think UBI will free them up a little bit to be able to still pursue self-employment.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about kind of obviously pay gap issues and kind of how we value potentially women are more likely to value themselves as less, and how potentially the UBI would be interesting to see whether if everyone was accessing that, people would value themselves more. I don't know, but that would be an interesting question to ask. But also it would mean that you are more empowered just as a citizen, really, but then especially as a woman, you have that financial backing behind you, whether you then choose to then go be a mother or whether that is in self-employment or not. Yeah, fascinating kind of like, wow. There was one thing I wanted to say, but I can't remember what it is, so we'll move on.
Freedom to make that choice, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that was it. Thank you. You've helped me find something. What I found so shocking when I tried to access support during COVID, when on my work went, is they asked me if I had a partner that I lived with, and I did. I do, but we're not in any way financially involved, just because that's our choice at the moment. And I had to put in all of his details and all of his things so that I could access this money, and I felt so bizarre. I felt so disempowered that I was like, hang on, this has nothing to do with anyone that I'm in a relationship with. It's my money and my like way of creating an income for myself. I don't need to get someone else's because they live in the same house as me. I found that fascinating.
So, like, maybe just build on that, the emancipatory position of the universal basic income is that it's paid individually. So I would receive my payment as with my wife, and she would receive her payment possibly in her own bank for her to do whatever she wishes. So, from a socialist perspective, equality and feminism going hand in hand, and it brings equality because everybody's got the same approach, whether male or female person. But the parents have got the same position as well. And it's like the tide that raises, both boats at the same time. But also, in terms of, I'll come back to it.
Situations as well.
That's where I was going.
I was feeling that's where you were going, sorry.
The freedom to leave.
Freedom to leave.
Freedom to leave.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, please.
Somebody from the board to use the service that we have, and we actually do some research, but they need people to be able to afford that. And this is where we are. That service that people are wanting to do, creative people, musicians, players, whatever, or suing, but they find it difficult to find service to use it. To afford them. But when we do that, we also support the people and make something but we are when we're using the skills, we are developing the skills, we are teaching the skills, and we are coming in healthy relationship with ourselves and ourselves.
Yeah, an important point, and within that was the sort of local circular economy. So if people locally don't have very much money to spend, what services are available? Who can start a business? Where are their customers? And if you have money, you can spend money, you can run a business, you can run a shop, etc. Yeah. Would anybody like to speak on that?
Yeah, I guess, I think when often people, I don't really talk about it enough, but one of the things which gets sort of said as a side joke is that if we all at the basic income, more people could become artists, and then we've got naturally benefits, thinking loads and loads of bad poetry, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I guess one of the other things is that if more people can become artists, also more people can go and see stuff. I think at the moment, like you said, you might not be able to afford to go to the music you want to go and see and all that kind of stuff. So, I think so far as I'm aware, no pilots are basically measured cultural production or participation as well. I think that's something to be. I know they're doing a pilot in Ireland for artists at the moment, which is interesting. Because I think if it happened in the UK, you get a lot of bad backlash because everyone hates artists.
Well, to speak French, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and so, but yeah, so I think that's the main sort of thing. And more people could actually go and see stuff. You'd have bigger audiences, but more. And again, it would be that collective thing. It wouldn't be the person on stage who's the superstar. Everyone would be doing it together. We'd all be able to participate and sort of have more equal something for that.
Very important point, thank you. Any other questions? I think I'm going to have time for just one more question, and then we're going to move to a coffee break. Is that right? Yeah. Before we finish, I'll just ask if you have any things that you don't think you mentioned. Okay. So one more. We've not heard from you yet. Please, can you give your question?
I'm a son producer and I'm a pensioner, and I go to give talks sometimes to pensioner groups, and if I say at the beginning, do you work, they all look at each other because they don't work for money, because we already have, most pensioners have a basic income, but the amount of work being done, even by a 100-year-old writing books, it's a demonstration to me that actually people have that basic income, creativity, caring, getting involved in sometimes awful politics, but you know, there are opportunities.
Thank you, great question, great point. Would anybody like to speak about that? So you mentioned so much in there, but essentially it's unpaid work, right? That's not valued currently through employment. Would anybody like to speak on that?
I think it was a point that I was missing before, and the lady who really just kind of prompted me to think about it as well. So it's taking the same kind of argument, but taking a step backwards again to the gender dimension about it. It allows parents to stay at home. It allows parents to grow their children themselves, you know, instead of having to be damned if they stay at home by social media because they stay at home parents and they're sponging off the state, or be damned by social media if they abandon their kids, you know, in a nursery to go off to work. You know, why would you pay somebody else to be the parents when you could be paid, you know, a universal basic income to grow your own children yourself? So maybe it's not the same point you would make, but it's something similar, but you prompted me to remember what I was thinking about. So I think a universal basic income would allow that emancipation for people to be able to stay at home and develop a really, really socially aware, well brought up family. Kind of what you was hinting at, I think, and I'm kind of bringing it into the, because I know a lot of grandparents and stay at home to look after the kids because the parents are great grandparents, yeah, because the parents have been so forced by the neoliberal capitalist system to just abandon the kids and go off to work to earn minimum wage just to pay for childcare. And again, the system's broke.
I think that's so amazing, and that why aren't we already using that as a bit of a trial? Because just obviously when we walked in earlier, there's like lots of trials and stuff, but that is a great example of stuff that we should be learning from. Like pensions are already doing so much stuff because they have, like you say, the idea of accessing money so that they can access things they enjoy and give so much back. It's absolutely amazing, really. And yeah, I think we should weigh that a bit more. Let's learn from scenarios that are similar. And one more thing though, I was going to say, one thing I'm doing, so I'm upskilling at the moment in studio work. And I'm having to do that for free just to get my foot in the door. So to get into where I can use the hardware that I don't have access to at home. I'm doing 5 or 6 days for free because that's the way of the world. And I feel like that's beneficial to my career and where I want to be going. But yeah, it's just interesting that, you know, I wouldn't have to make such a maybe considered or to be stressed about taking those 6 days of not being paid if there was an opportunity to have a universal basic income.
Fantastic, thank you. Does anybody have any burning last points before we wrap up and take a break? Yeah, please.
Sorry, I appreciate that I've spoken a lot, so I apologise for that. But I know that the panel's sort of looking at how to move from the academic to the real world sort of thing. And I do think that it is through centering people who you're speaking to, getting people to think about from their own experience, that whole thing of like, oh, you know, we give basic income to everyone, they'll become lazy, and your point about pensions is a classic example of like, yeah, pensioners work harder after, you don't, once you've retired, you don't get a day off. Right? But sorry, to finish with some shameless self-promotion, is in the packs which you were given or might not have been given, there's some basic income top trumps, which is something I've made, which is using participants from different trials from around the world to make top trump cards. So it's got scores about how their life has changed, but also a small testimony from this sort of thing. And again, the idea behind that is to get people to think beyond the, oh, everyone become lazy or so, actually reading what someone did in America, what someone did in India or Canada, and actually sort of seeing, you know, being able to go, all right, that's how my life would change, or that's how it would affect me. I think that's what we need to start talking to people in that kind of way to get them to think beyond the sort of academic papers and sort of centering in their own sort of systems and stuff.
One last one. Sorry, the gentleman in the back wrote this question about the decommodification of housing. Really interested in that. And in terms of, are you talking about landlordism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's around what we're weird and negative. So like sit there and solve every problem.
Yeah.
But if we've got like a predatory extractive economy, and it's huge capital base, and people that are quite easily dispersed, we don't also get equal rights.
Yeah, so in terms of, a simplification of that question is, if we had a universal basic income, would our landlords increase the price of rent?
Yeah.
My point on that would be that it would have to come with something like red caps, but that would be in the immediacy. In the long term, universal basic income is a long-term policy. And in the long-term approach, I'm a tenant. I've always been a tenant since I left home. I've been renting for 20 years. I'm stuck in a rent trap. I cannot afford to save for a deposit to buy my own house. I'm currently paying nearly £1,000 a month to live in a shitty terraced house in London. If I've got an extra pocket of money, I'm saving up for a deposit, and I'm going to put my landlord out of business unless he lowers his rent. I appreciate some people will still like to rent, but it will, for me, a universal basic income, instead of the capital system being top down, it revolutionises and it turns it bottom up. People get the power. I will have more money to save for a deposit, and I'll be able to move out and buy my own house, and my landlord will be forced out of business almost, or he will be forced to drop his rent to an affordable level for everybody. That's my view of it. Sorry.
Okay, that's great. Perfect. Okay, please join me in thanking our panel. We're going to